Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another video from my channel Interactive Education, running for the best education possible from the student to the student for a better experience. And today we will be continuing our chapter which we had begun before, right? And that is reproduction in organisms. We remember that we had started reproduction in organisms, and we had an introduction onto sexual reproduction, and today we will be looking into the second form of sexual reproduction, that is in the human being. Sexual reproduction in human beings, right? So that's the second part of sexual reproduction after plants. Now we move on to human beings, right? Now, human beings do not reproduce through any asexual method. They only reproduce through sexual form of reproduction, where there is fertilization of sperm, which is the male gamete, the sperm, which is the male gamete, and ovum, that is the egg, which is the female gamete. So that's the process of fertilization in human beings. The sperm, which is the male gamete, fertilizes the ovum, which is the female gamete. This can be seen through a diagram. Usually what happens is that we have an ovum given by the female, which contains some form of a nuclei which has half the number of chromosomes, right? It is a haploid cell. It only contains half the number of chromosomes. It is a haploid cell, right? And then we have the sperm, which is the female gamete, right? Right? And this also has only N chromosomes and is again a haploid cell. Haploid cell is a cell which contains half the number of normal chromosomes, and I've discussed this in my series on cell division, that there are two kinds of cells. There is a haploid cell which has only half the number of chromosomes, and haploid cells are mainly the sex cells or the gametes, right? They are haploid. And there is a second form of cell which is called diploid cell, which is the normal cell. All the normal cells of the body, they are diploid. They contain 2 N chromosomes. They contain exactly 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? But the haploid cells only contain 23 chromosomes. Not 23 pairs of chromosomes, they only contain 23 chromosomes. And we've discussed why they have this property. It's because they have to combine their DNA, and together, end of the day, they'll form 46 chromosomes, which will be 2 into 23. So there will be 23 pairs of chromosomes in the final zygote, right? So basically, in the sexual reproduction process in human beings, there is fertilization of sperm and ovum, and this fertilization process produces the fertilized ovum or the fertilized egg, which is called the zygote, right? But this is what happens in the process. But there's one question which is really important, and what that is that how does the sperm and the ovum, how do they form in the first place? And we've seen in our lower classes that over the years and as a person grows, there is a particular stage when certain body changes occur, certain developments in the body take place. And there is a point when the development of secondary sexual characteristics takes place. Secondary sexual characters are nothing but, they are the characteristics of males and females. They are not characteristic property, right? Those are the characteristics of males and females. Development of secondary sexual characters takes place after a particular age, right? And when this particular particular characteristic development starts, when the development of the secondary sexual characteristic starts, that stage and until the end of the development of the secondary sexual characteristics, this phase of development is known as puberty. Right? We know that puberty is basically that phase during which the development of secondary sexual characteristics takes place. Like males, they develop mustaches, they develop facial hair, right? Their penis starts growing larger. Then we have females, their hips widen, okay, their breasts start developing. So these things take place during the puberty phase, right? That's what is taking place during puberty. So along all of these physical changes, there is also an internal change in the body which is taking place, and that is the development of reproductive organs. And basically the development of reproductive organs is taking place so as to accommodate, so as to meet the need for sexual maturity, to be able to meet sexual maturity. And at the end of puberty, a person is completely sexually mature, that is, he or she is able and is ready to be able to reproduce. That is known as sexual maturity. So during the development of reproductive organs, what we are trying to do is that we are trying to achieve sexual maturity, and most of the body's energy is concentrated on achieving this sexual maturity, right? And this sexual maturity is achieved by the action of various hormones as well, right? Like in males, we have testosterone, which is secreted by the testes, and we have in females two hormones, estrogen and progesterone, right? So these hormones are called sex hormones. These hormones are called sex hormones. Right? So that's with your hormones. And these hormones help in the development of the secondary sexual characters, and they also help in attaining the development of reproductive organs and subsequently sexual maturity. Testosterone in males helps in sperm development as well as secondary sexual characteristic development. In females, two hormones have two different functions. Estrogen helps in development of secondary sexual characters. Okay, so estrogen helps in developing that, whereas progesterone is mainly a reproductive organ. Reproductive hormone. So it's mainly a reproductive hormone, and this is mainly concentrated on maintaining pregnancy in a female, right? It helps in maintaining pregnancy in a female. So after fertilization, the body needs to be made ready to be able to develop the growing zygote. So to maintain that pregnancy, progesterone helps. It also helps in development of ovum. So maturation of ovum, because when a girl is born, actually there are ovum in her ovaries, but they are immature ovum. Over the years, due to the action of these progesterone, these ovum develop, and when puberty strikes, these ovum finally are mature and they begin releasing, right? They are beginning to release. We'll talk about all that. So this is how the development of the gametes takes place in human beings, right? And another question which arises is that, okay, the male has sperms, the female has ovum. How are these going to come together for fertilization? Well, there is a process by which the male and female gametes, the bodies come together and they interact to help the sperm reach the ovum, and this process is obviously known as sexual intercourse. Now we know that during this process, during the act of sexual intercourse, the bodies are going to join together and the sperm from the male is going to transfer through the vagina to the ovum of the female for fertilization, right? So through this process, that's what we're going to achieve, right? So that's an intro into sexual reproduction in human beings and what all takes place. Let's now look at the parts of the human reproductive system, both male and female. First of all, I'm going to take up the female reproductive system. So this is the female reproductive system. So you can see that in the female reproductive system, we have the vagina, that is the opening, right? This is the opening, and this is called the vagina. Then from the vagina, there is a canal, which is called the cervical canal, and then we finally reach the cervix. This is, this region of the uterus. This is known as cervix, and this whole region here is known as the uterus. It is known as the uterus, right? And it is here where the development of the zygote into a fetus and then further into a baby takes place. The uterus is composed of two parts. There is the uterine cavity, which is this space in the uterus, and there is the lining of the uterus, which is called the uterine fundus. Okay, so that's the lining of the uterine wall. Next, we have the two fallopian tubes. This is known as a fallopian tube. And there is another name for the fallopian tube. It is also called the oviduct. Okay, so both of them are fallopian tubes. There are two fallopian tubes, and these fallopian tubes ultimately they have a curve. They curve together, right? And they culminate and have an end with the formation of two ovaries. So this is also an ovary, right? So these are the locations, these are the place where the ovum or the female gametes develop and are stored, right? That's the ovary, right? So this is basically the female reproductive system. There's a vagina, there's a cervix, there's an ovary, and there's the fallopian tube. These are the main parts you need to know, right? Isthmus, ampulla, and infundibulum. These are not too important. They are in the 12th standard textbook, and they, basically involve the parts of the fallopian tube. Even endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium. Again, these are also in a bit of detail of the layers of the uterine wall, right? Endometrium is the innermost wall, myometrium is the middlemost wall, and perimetrium is the outermost wall of the uterus. Fallopian tube, the forwardmost part is the isthmus, the middle part is the ampulla, and the end part is called the infundibulum. And when the fallopian tube finally culminates in a curve, there are some hair-like projections at the end, right? These hair-like projections are called fimbriae. Okay, so these are the parts of the female reproductive system, right? Now let's move on to the male reproductive system. Now this is the male reproductive system. In male reproductive system, the main parts are the penis, the testis, the prostate gland, the scrotum, the vas deferens, the ureter, the seminal vesicle, and the bladder, as well as the penis and the urethra, right? So these are the main parts of the male reproductive system in human beings. The most important part is the testis, and it is in this testis where the process of spermatogenesis takes place. This is the part where the process of spermatogenesis takes place, which is basically the process of development of sperms. So it is the location, it is the place where the development of sperms takes place, the formation and the growth of sperms takes place, right? So that's the spermatogenesis process takes place in the testis. Therefore, we call the testis as the functional unit of the male reproductive system in human beings. It has a similar function as that of the ovary in the female reproductive system. Next, this testis is enclosed in an external sac Okay, it's enclosed in an external sac which is called the scrotum. So the scrotum is basically an external sac which holds the testis or the testicles. And what is the basic function of the scrotum? Basically, it provides a lower temperature than the body for sperm development or for spermatogenesis. So for the process of spermatogenesis, a temperature slightly lower than the body temperature is required, and that's what the scrotum does. It provides a lower temperature so that the spermatogenesis process takes place smoothly, right? Next, these sperms, when they are finally developed and when they're supposed to be released during sexual intercourse, these sperms move from the testis through the vas deferens, and this vas deferens has another name. It is called the sperm duct. It carries the sperms from the testis towards the urethra for removal from the body. So vas deferens carries, it's a pipe-like structure, duct-like structure, which takes the sperm, and it finally goes and passes through this region, right? And in this region there are various glands. There is the prostate gland right here, and there are seminal vesicles, right? This is another seminal vesicle. This gland is called Cowper's gland. It's called Cowper's gland. It's another form of seminal vesicle. So these glands, they basically secrete their fluids into the sperm. So they secrete their fluids. So all these, okay, these glands, they secrete fluids. And they secrete their secretions. And what is the function of these secretions? Well, there are sperms. These sperms then go into a fluid. And this fluid of the sperm, right, it gives nourishment and enables them to survive. Okay, so it basically helps the sperms to achieve nourishment, right? So it enables them to survive for some time. And this fluid ultimately, which contains the sperms as well as the secretions of these seminal vesicles and Cowper's gland and prostate gland, this forms the fluid, and this fluid which is formed as a result is known as the seminal fluid. Right? Seminal fluid, and it is also called semen. So this is, the basic thing which takes place in the male reproductive system. And after this semen then travels to the urethra. And basically you see the urethra acts as a common passage for both the transfer, the removal of urine as well as the semen. So finally, this fluid flows through the urethra and is thrown out of the body through the opening of the penis, which is the urinary opening as well, right? So this is basically the male reproductive system in human beings, right? So during sexual intercourse, the semen finally travels down the penis and is finally ejaculated out of the body to the vagina of the woman, where the sperms travel. Now after the intercourse process, the sperms finally enter the vagina, they move down, and basically the egg is here in the fallopian tube, right? So the sperms move down and they go and fertilize the egg, which is in the fallopian tube. It can go either here or either here, right? So they go and fertilize the egg in the fallopian tube. During the sexual intercourse process, when the sperms are released, they finally go and fertilize the egg. Once this egg is fertilized and the zygote is formed, this egg then moves down and comes to the uterus, right? And whenever an egg is released every month. An egg is released every month by the ovary into the fallopian tube, and if this egg gets fertilized, to receive the fertilized egg into the uterine wall or into the uterus, the uterine wall, the lining of the uterus, the uterine fundus, it becomes thick. So this wall, right, this lining here of the uterus to receive the zygote, which will further develop into a baby and into an embryo, it becomes thick. And thick, spongy, and gets some blood vessels. So basically it garners some blood vessels, and these blood vessels, they are the ones which are going to provide nourishment to the growing embryo. So after it comes to the uterine wall, it divides many times. It divides several times and finally forms a structure. Okay, this structure, after division of the zygote several times, the structure formed is called the embryo. Right? So the embryo is formed. Once the embryo is formed, this embryo, right, the embryo over a period starts developing, and finally it develops into a fetus, right? The fetus is basically a structure which, you know, is basically an organism. It is a baby which has not yet taken birth. But it is the developed baby which has developed hands, legs over time. Okay, it develops all these things. The embryo develops legs, hands, organs, etc. Okay, and how is the developing fetus now given nourishment? Because you know, an organism needs to perform life processes, it needs to excrete its waste, it needs food, nourishment, all these things. So how is that taken care of? Well, that's where the blood vessels come in. When finally this process is done, right, when this baby is formed and all, there is a particular disc-like structure which develops just beneath the fetus, and this disc-like structure is known as the placenta, and it is basically a tissue. It is a placental tissue which develops just beneath the baby, right, and the placenta is richly supplied with blood vessels. So here, since it is richly supplied with blood vessels, it also helps in the absorption process, right? A lot of absorption takes place, and it is also supplied with villi, right? So these villi, you know, they increase the surface area for absorption. So the fetus or the growing baby, it secretes some, you know, some waste material that is absorbed through the villi to the blood, and this blood can excrete the waste products out of the mother's body, right? Moreover, then we also have the process of nutrition, which the blood vessels provide the growing baby. That is why a mother is advised to take nutrition food during pregnancy, because during this period the baby also needs to develop. So the food, the nutrition, the you know, the source of energy present in the blood, now this is from where the baby is going to obtain its nutrition. And this placental tissue also helps in excretion of waste material, you know, through the blood vessels, because as I told you, it is richly supplied with blood vessels and villi, so they can be easily absorbed. You can easily absorb the waste materials, you can provide some gaseous exchange, you can provide nourishment to the growing baby. So all these things, all these processes are basically carried out by the placenta, and the fetus is connected to the placenta by a cord which is known as the umbilical cord, right? The baby is connected to the placenta through a cord which is known as the umbilical cord, okay, that connects the baby to the placenta, right? And there is also a fluid present in the uterus at the time which helps in the development of the baby, right? Which helps in, and the baby floats in this fluid, right? So After a period of 9 months, all this process goes on for a period of 9 months, and after a period of 9 months, right, about 9 months, the baby becomes ready and is finally developed. So at that time, the walls and the muscles of the cervix and the vagina, they rhythmically contract, right? The cervix and the vagina, the parts of the cervix, muscles of cervix and vagina, they continuously contract. So there's rhythmic contraction. And because of this rhythmic contraction of the muscles of the cervix and vagina, the fetus, the mother actually experiences some pain. And this you would see if a mother is about to give birth. This pain felt is due to this contraction, and that period is known as labor period. And it's the period when the baby is just about to be born. So due to the rhythmic contraction, the baby is finally, taken out of the mother's uterus, because now this opens up, right? So the baby is finally taken out of the uterus through the vagina out of the body, right? And this is how the baby is born. And that is why, since the baby is taken out of the vagina, right, for birth, the vagina is also, for that reason, the vagina is also referred to as the birth canal. Right? So that is how a baby is born, and finally reproduction process is over. Right? So this is how reproduction takes place in human beings. And with this, we conclude our lecture on sexual reproduction in human beings. I hope you understood everything. I hope there's no doubt left at all. If there's any doubt, they are most welcome in the comment section below. I'm really pleased to be teaching you all, and it's a very pleasure for me to spread my knowledge and interact with all students from around the world. Thank you very much for joining me today. Do keep watching, and in the next video we will be discussing the last portion of this chapter, and this finishing her off, and the last portion is reproductive health. And we will see what is reproductive health and its importance. Thank you very much for joining me. Goodbye. Stay healthy, stay smart, and do keep studying. Please like and subscribe. Goodbye, and do take very good care of yourself.